1811 4000 यही कंज्यूमर हेल्पलाइन।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
Us on the show tonight on this Diwali Eve to tell us whether Goddess Lakshmi has abandoned India. TV Mohandas Pai, Director Human Resources of Infosys, joining us from Bangalore. Prof.S.R.Khanna, Managing Trustee, Consumer Voice, is in Delhi. Premchand Palati, Director, Center for Forecasting and Research, are all joining us. Now, it's been called the greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression of 1929. Many analysts say this is the death of free market capitalism. Others say it's the birth of a new set of regulations on the financial sector. How do the colossal financial failures of the West affect India? We at CNN-IBN, in partnership with the Hindustan Times, decided to carry out an opinion poll to understand what people are thinking about the economic downturn. The poll was conducted by GfK Mode in 7 cities: Delhi, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai and Kolkata between October 21st and 22nd. A total of 1,431 street interviews were conducted. So here's the first finding of our poll. The question we asked: are you worried about the economic slowdown? 82%, that's 4 out of 5, said yes, they are concerned. 18% said no. Our next question was: have you been personally affected by the crash in the stock market? Now this is interesting. 47% said yes, but 53% said no, they have not been affected by the market meltdown. A small majority saying no, not affected. People in Hyderabad and Ahmedabad were most affected, in fact. Now the question we asked next was: where would you invest today? That was our next question. 37% said land or property, 34% said bank fixed deposits, 18% said gold, 11% said mutual funds and stock markets. Well, expectedly stock markets right at the bottom there. The next question we asked was: have people personally cut down on their spending, and what did they tell us? 43% said yes, but again this is another very interesting result. 50% said no. So 57, I beg your pardon, said no. And so 57%, now that is a very interesting figure, saying no, we are in fact not that worried. Now let's start with our discussion now. Let's go across to Mohandas Pai. Mohandas Pai, you know, you saw the findings of our poll over there, in fact, saying 53% saying not worried about losing your job, 57% saying no, haven't cut down on spending, and 53% saying no, have not been affected by market meltdown. So are we right to conclude that sentiment is universally turning very poor and very bad, or is it a much more robust, commonsensical approach among Indians?
Well, I think we are seeing bad news on TV every single day and in the newspapers because we are part of the global community now. That is a large part of India. The educated middle class is part of the global community, and I think it's creating more fear and a sense of anxiety than the reality on the ground. The reality is that people have not been hurt much. Their incomes are secure so far. Yes, the stock markets have come down, and not many people in India invest in the stock market, but the overarching news that you get from media is that the world is almost coming to an end. So every time you open the newspapers, you look at TV, you find that there's some economic condition becoming bad, and I think that's creating anxiety. So if you talk to people across the board, the people in the educated middle class holding good jobs feel much more anxious. The people from the lower middle class and the government sector don't feel anything. So I guess it's a very divided opinion that you see across the board. Right. And I think as things go by, you know, we could see a further deterioration in the situation, and I think we have to wait and see.
Right. Well, let's hear now from our consumer expert. Actually, Khanna, a top Delhi editor, was telling me last night that usually on Diwali he gets 1 bottle of whiskey. He gets 10 bottles of whiskey. This time he's just got 1 bottle of whiskey. So has spending really gone down, or are Indians too big spenders to really go back to austerity and go back to Nehruvian social?
You see, the Indian consumer who works very hard in his office and whatever he does, earns money, and he spends it very wisely. Whenever he sees a threat on the horizon, whether that is a virtual threat or a real threat, he actually changes his consumption pattern into saving more for the rainy day. And that's what is happening. I agree with what your survey says, is that a section of the people have been affected by the fear psychosis. And that psychosis is on the Dalal street. Let's not forget, Sagarika, less than 5% of Indian families are involved with any kind of shares and mutual fund. Bulk of the people still have great faith in fixed deposits, and they are giving bumper returns of 10.5% today in the State Bank of India. And also, they are investing in land and real estate, not today or yesterday, but for times immemorial.
Right.
Land has been a symbol of wealth, and if consumers have savings, that's where it goes.
But is there a loss of trust? A loss of trust in the stock market? You know, the stock market was seen as the great barometer of our economic progress.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it's a lack of trust. They do believe that the stock market is meant only for the lion-hearted. Those who have lion hearts, who are willing to take risks and get hurt. 95% of Indians don't go down that street. It's this small number of people who take a part of their savings and go to these markets. They still have a portfolio of investments in land and fixed deposits and gold and so on. That doesn't mean every Indian is affected. It's a very small percentage. But as our friend from Infosys was saying, the bad news is on every channel, and therefore even those people who are not affected, they get scared. I mean, for example, if there is an earthquake in Kutch, people in Kerala start feeling insecure. So that's really the story. The real bad story is in USA. If the recession is going to take root, third quarter figures in USA drop, and 3 successive quarters show bad results, US is going to be in recession, and that means at least 2 to 3 years of recession. Because I have never seen an American recession end before 2 to 3 years. And if it becomes OECD-wise, it goes into the Eurozone, it will affect India marginally. And only those sectors which are exposed globally, you know, companies of my colleague who just spoke from Infosys, other export industries will be hurt.
Right,
so
let's
to that extent,
India will be hurt. The export industries will certainly be hurt. But on the other hand, FIIs are pulling out. Let's hear from Premchand Paleti, Director, Center for Forecasting and Research. Mr. Paleti, what do you feel about the views raised by Sriram Khanna and by Mohandas Pai that this is in some senses a media-created crisis, a middle-class crisis, or is there in fact a genuine trickle down to the non-organized workers?
No, that's true. You see, it's a failure of capitalism actually. They're not invested properly in research. Fuel, food and environment. In these areas needed investment in research. That has not been done in past several years. And it's been more on investment on consumption. So what we see is of that.
So in fact, now the big call is for the government to spend money on infrastructure to create demand in cement, create demand in steel, so that the demand rises and investment is created. But what is that going to do to our fiscal deficit? Of course, all those questions will come up later. But let's get you our next question on the poll. Are you worried about losing your job? That's the question we asked. And here's what we found. 47% said yes, but again, a robust answer, 53% said no. So a small majority again saying no. The other question we asked was, is it right for companies to cut jobs? 21% say yes, and very predictably 17%, almost 4 out of 5 say no. Mohandas Pai, again we have a majority there, 53%, saying we are not worried about losing our jobs. Now, is this realistic? Are Indians smoking some kind of happy drug? Should they be more realistic that yes, in fact, if businesses cut back, there will be job cuts?
Well, Sagarika, it's true that if the economy comes off, there will be some job cuts. I mean, it will be in some sectors which are export oriented, and we see it in the garment industry already happening because orders have been cancelled. But it's not going to be very widespread. Remember, this is an internal consumption driven market. This is not totally an export driven market. We have a very small share of exports to GDP, unlike China. So there will be some pain in case things go from bad to worse. But even in spite of this pain, we'll still grow 6 to 7%. At a time when the world is growing at maybe 1 to 2%, growing at 6 to 7% is enormous, is very, very high. We are comparing this 6 to 7% growth maybe next year with the growth of 9% average we had for the last 5 years. So if you compare it looks low. In absolute terms, I think it's a great thing. And if the government comes out with a little bit of policy changes like accelerating decisions and making sure that infrastructure takes off, if you remove the all the barriers that come in infrastructure taking off, then I think you'll see good growth. I don't think it's going to be bad for India, but things are going to be, people are going to be anxious about the future. There's no doubt about that because of global media.
Sriram Khanna, are you sensing that anxiety among the Indian consumer?
Yes, many of my students ask me, sir, will we get jobs this time? I said, yes, you will all get jobs, but maybe you're not going to get the kind of high scales of pay that you're expecting for. So I do expect that new jobs will offer lower scales of pay and not the kind of 20-30% annual growths that we have in the last 5 or 6 years. So jobs will be there. I have no doubt about it because the Indian economy is growing, Indian consumption is growing, and it's like Mohandas said, we are an internally consumption-driven economy.
Right.
Domestic consumption is growing. I have a fear only for the poor in India because the real problem before Wall Street took over the television screens a few weeks ago was the food prices in India and domestic inflation. We were crying hoarse the few weeks before that about 11% inflation. Nobody's talking about 11% inflation because we have a bigger devil coming onto the screen. But the real problem is going to be inflation.
Right.
Unless we get a bumper crop.
Right, we're
unless
going to
food
hold that
prices go
thought.
down.
Hold that thought. We're going to have to take a short break at this point, but very wise words there from our panelists saying, is this a crisis that we're overblowing? Because in fact, robust, commonsensical figures coming out from our poll. Much more on this Face the Nation special when we come back. Welcome to Face the Nation, where we are bringing you the exclusive results of an opinion poll on the downturn in partnership with the Hindustan Times. Has Goddess Lakshmi abandoned us this Diwali? Well, the next question that we asked on our poll was, do you think nationalized banks are safer than private banks? 54% said yes, 46% said no, both are the same. And the next question we asked, is it the government's responsibility to bail out private banks if they face a financial problem? This is, of course, an ideological question. Do we believe in government intervention into the free market? 68% said yes. 32% said no, it's not the government's job to bail out banks. Big majority they're saying yes, we are not fully into the free markets. The government must bail out banks that are failing. Let's go across to Mohandas Pai. Mohandas Pai, we heard Sriram Khanna earlier saying that in fact export industry is going to be affected. We know that IT is very reliant on export. So what are you counseling the young engineers of Infosys at the moment? Are you telling them, listen guys, time to tighten your belts, don't dream too big, just be happy with what you have?
No, we're telling them keep your passion, keep your energy, and keep working hard, keep innovating, because things are going to turn around faster than you think. We are seeing some uncertainty in the marketplace, so people are not taking decisions. And as soon as things settle down, and will settle down in the West, I mean, people will get used to lower growth because the central banks are pumping so much of money. $3.3 trillion have been pumped in. So we will see work coming offshore in a large measure. So we're telling them, keep your passion, energy up, be productive, be innovative. Things will turn around faster than things. I think it's going to work. So our scenario is different. Yeah, tell me.
But do you think that in many ways a dream has been sold to these young people? That for too long the economy was like a bubble. It was like a 4-year bull run, and the employers and employees were both selling each other's dreams, and that kind of mental transformation has to now take place. There has to be a dose of reality now.
Well, there has to be a dose of reality. Everything is not going to be one way. And in the last 5 years, people have not seen a downturn, and this is the downturn. But remember, Sagarika, globally, this is once in 100-year event. This is not an event which happens every 5 years, every 10 years. This is an event of huge proportions. Once in 100 years, the whole financial system of the globe is under stress. You're seeing banks with $1 trillion balance sheet disappear in 24 hours. We never heard of that. Nobody has written about it. Nobody has even thought it's probable, but it's happened. And you have to pump in enormous amounts of money. So this is very different. But this is a wake-up call, and I think it's good that people go through this process. They understand things have to go up and down. And I'm sure the people who go through this process will be much better off in future, and they'll be more realistic.
Well, let's put a different, sort of slightly ideological question to Sriram Khanna here. Sriram Khanna, we saw on our poll here that 68% said that it's the government's responsibility to bail out private banks if they face a financial. Does that mean that free market capitalism, in some senses, has been revealed to be flawed.
Sagarika, the Indian consumer is very clear. In the last 7 or 8 years, whenever there has been a problem with any private bank or a cooperative bank, it's the RBI and the government of India which have come around and said, hey, you are going out of line, you have to merge. And remember, how many of these banks have actually merged, have been forced to merge? Let me tell you, nothing of the sort that has happened in America vis-a-vis banks is expected to happen in India.
But does the government of India have money? Does the government of India have enough cash to bail out these banks and to pump in money?
No. It's not a question of bailing out these banks. What has happened is, in the past, the weaker banks have been merged with the stronger banks. And these mergers have not been voluntary. They have been really guided by the Department of Banking of the Union of India and the Reserve Bank of India. And let me tell you, the banking regulator in our country is among the best in the world. And today I can say, a much better job than the Federal Reserve in USA. Because none of the Indian banks have gone down. None of the Indian banks have gone down. So I have my faith in the RBI and the Department of Banking. Let me tell you, any minister may come and go, any party may come and go. But the institution regulating banks is rock solid. Rock solid.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Premchand Paleti, do you think this is the time, in fact, for all companies, all businesses to practice what is being called compassionate capitalism, to show that we are a nation and not a market? So, you know, to forego hire and fire policies, to in fact go in for compassionate retrenchment, to show capitalism's human face if people have to be laid off?
That's true. Actually, I've been following several B schools and their placements. There's a pall of gloom in most of the campuses. Banking and finance has been a major recruiter for the last several years. But now, since the pre-placement talks is already on between B schools and industry, the pulse is registered, and the communication they're getting is that they won't hire many students from the campuses, and the salaries would also go down.
Right.
So I think they need to rethink on their strategies, on growth strategies.
Mohandas Pai, what would you say to a young MBA or someone who is just setting off in a career in management or in finance, that you know that the world they lived in is very different from now on?
No, I would tell them, look at the first 5 years of a career as a time to build up a capability and get the relevant experience. Even if the economy is down, look around for good jobs, enough good jobs. In fact, Sagarika, I think the public sector is going to open up in a dramatic manner in the next 5 years. About 15 to 20 lakh jobs are going to be available in the public sector in India, and the salary scales are going to be pretty good because the public sector hasn't hired in the last 18 years. And now, in the next 5 years, about 25% of the workforce will retire, and there are going to be huge opportunities. So I think there's going to be no dearth of jobs, but the pay scale, the absurd pay scales that you saw in the finance sector will not be available because the surplus capacity. So I would say, use the next 5 years as a means to develop your capability, build your expertise, get experience, you will become better managers, and use that to grow your careers in a much better manner than earlier. So I think they got a great scope. I don't see any downturn for them.
Okay, I'm just going to ask one last quick question to Sriram Khanna, and then we'll end the show. Sriram Khanna, are people believing the reassuring noises that the Prime Minister and Finance Minister are making?
I wouldn't say they are believing what is being told to them, but they are smart enough to take the signals from all over the place.
Right.
And what their understanding is, it could have been worse as it is in USA. Thank God we will have 7% growth.
Right.
And that is pretty good by Indian standards.
Right, but
so
we're
I think there's a base of optimism in this climate.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. That's a good note to end on this Diwali Eve, that 7% growth is not all that bad, and optimism is necessary even with all the gloom and doom all around. Thanks very much indeed to Mohandas Pai, Professor Sriram Khanna, Premchand Paleti. Thanks very much indeed. That's all on Face the Nation. Catch the detailed results of the poll in the Hindustan Times tomorrow, and a second part of the poll on the weekend edition with Rajdeep this Saturday. Well, a joyous Diwali to you. Stay safe and have a lovely time. Thanks for watching.